This is Charlotte Talk's weekly news roundup. I'm David Borax in for Mike Collins. It's been a scorching week here in the Carolinas and a busy one for news. We'll try to catch you up on what's going on in Charlotte, the Carolinas, and beyond. Some fireworks at the County Commission over whether commissioners improperly used email to talk about the budget. At the Charlotte City Council, protesters against abortion rights speak out against a proposed change in the city's noise ordinance. They say it would violate their right to free speech. A new state budget is near final approval, and North Carolina craft brewers get the right to brew more, and a Charlotte performer makes it to Broadway. To talk about all of this today, we've assembled an illustrious panel of local journalists. Glenn Berkins, editor and publisher of Q City Metro. Hello, Glenn.
Good morning.
Jonathan Lowe, reporter for Spectrum News.
Good morning, David.
Sarah D'Elia, a WFAE reporter and host of the podcast She Says.
Morning.
Hey, Sarah. And reporter Joe Bruno from WSOC TV.
Hey,
Joe.
David.
Good morning. You can join the conversation on social media. You can find us at WFAE. Well, let's start out this morning with the county budget and the fireworks that we had there on Tuesday. That meeting Tuesday was the annual straw vote on budget adjustments, and it was overshadowed, I think, by questions about an email from Board Chair George Dunlap's personal account. It suggested that he and other commissioners had negotiated budget changes in private. Joe, what's going on here?
So basically, the budget adjustments were a done deal before anybody walked into the Valerie Woodward Center this week. Mr. Dunlap, he sent a pretty lengthy email saying that here is my proposal. This is what I'm going to make a motion for. Based on talking to all of you, this should pass unanimously, and then we can all go home, essentially, is what he said. He sent it from his personal account to all of the county commissioners, and then what happened next was some county commissioners engaged with him. One county commissioner, Elaine Powell, she responded saying, I have some concerns about the IT positions being eliminated. Susan Harded responding saying, I support this motion. And then Pat Cotham responded saying, hey, wait a second, what is this all about? Are we evading the public here?
And what is the issue here as far as public meetings go?
There's a couple issues. One is that Mr. Dunlap used his personal email address to communicate. That, of course, makes it difficult if there were any public records requests. But the major issue was the simultaneous communication that followed the discussion of the budget through email, even that back and forth between Powell and Dunlap saying, hey, listen, I need more clarification on this, because that's essentially, the discussion that would take place during the budget meeting.
Well, let's hear what Chairman George Dunlap had to say. During Tuesday's vote, he defended their actions.
At no time did we do anything illegal. At no time did we do anything inappropriate.
What did the county attorney say during that meeting?
The county attorney is defending Dunlap. He says that he does not believe that any open meetings laws were violated. But if you ask the NC Open Government Coalition, if you ask First Amendment attorney Jonathan Jones, or even North Carolina brain Jerry Cohen, they all disagree with the county attorney on his assessment there.
Mm-hmm. Well, others disagreed. What did we hear from some of the other commissioners during the meeting there?
Pat Cotham was worried that this would be portrayed as a backroom deal. But other than Pat Cotham, pretty much all of the other commissioners took Dunlap's side here, believing that the process has been very transparent. And in all honesty, it has. Up until this point, everything has gone pretty well for the county commissioners. They've had a lot of public hearings, and they have had a lot of chances for the public to solicit feedback.
Well, let's hear what Pat Cotham had to say.
I responded to him that I was very worried how this would look, and it wasn't transparent. And I would, like I said, I use words like this is going to look like a backroom deal.
So, David, I think to put a little small button on and following up on what Joe just said, it kind of goes back to, or reminds me of the retreat and some other controversial votes. I don't know if you'll agree, Joe, but seeing Pat Cotham emerge as someone who's kind of been an outlier on some votes. A lot of times we've seen her, for instance, when they voted on the county manager's raise, she was the only one that voted against it. Chairman Dunlap, I think there was another soundbite where he where he said that Commissioner Cotham is, quote, disgruntled. So I know that there has been some back and forth between Commissioner Cotham and Commissioner Dunlap, just some kind of backstory for people to kind of know looking at what has transpired this week.
Yeah, I was going to say that if anything, that this has shown us that there's definitely some tension that's going on within the county commission. It's, I think George Dunlap said something about she was invited to be part of the conversation but decided not to be. So there's clearly some tension going on there.
Glenn Berkins.
I think the debate over this misses a point, and it kind of reminds me of the discussions and debate that's going on in Washington about the president's actions and whether they met the definition of this or whether they were strictly legal or whatever. And I think to some degree that misses a point. If we're having to question whether something is technically legal, then we probably shouldn't do it in government. These open government laws are here for a reason. As voters, as taxpayers, as citizens, we want to and we deserve to know what conversations are being had. And when conversations are had offline by email, especially using personal email, whether it violates the letter of the law, it certainly violates the spirit of the law, and it shouldn't be done.
And to Glenn's point, ordinarily we would see those discussions playing out in some sort of public hearing related to the budget. That's why they have these workshops to allow the public to see and hear and in some cases engage with them on changes and suggestions for other ways of handling the county budget. So absolutely, the other thing is, what if we wanted to FOIA, or excuse me, Public Information Act, those emails and see what was said? It was done on a personal email. So, will the public even really know what was said?
Is the point here that we should have heard this discussion during that meeting as opposed to beforehand by email?
Yeah, I mean, any discussion over the budget, any questions, that should be done in the public.
Well, will we hear any more about this, or is this kind of flared up and nothing else will happen?
I doubt we'll hear a whole lot about this, but I will definitely do more stories about the tensions on the county commissioners in the future, I have a feeling.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were discussing adjustments to the budget. What is in these adjustments, and what's in the budget this year?
So the changes they made, they slashed a bunch of positions. They're new positions, so it's not like people are losing their jobs. They're just not going to fill these roles. So there are a bunch of different departments, IT, HR, the tax office. So they eliminated those new positions, and they freed up some money to provide about $1 million or $2 million for land acquisition and an extra $1 million for parks. Two major priorities for the county.
And we talked on this program the other day about the issue with parks. They ranked very low again this year in a national park score ranking. And one of the complaints from people who are supporters of parks here is that the county is not being proactive in purchasing land at a time when prices are only going up and land is getting more scarce. So,
right, and developers are coming in at a pretty quick rate and buying up pretty large gobs of land. So that's essentially what the county and the city, are competing with.
What's next for the budget?
It will be signed off on in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. And then new budget year takes effect July 1st. Well, let's turn our attention now to the city council meeting from Tuesday night. In a minute, we're going to talk about more electric buses on the way, Joe. But first, the public forum section of the meeting brought up a topic that's been on the council's radar but wasn't on the agenda for any action. The council's considering changes to the noise ordinance. Sarah, can you lay out the issue for us?
Sure. So the proposed changes for the noise ordinance would include to limit amplified sound 200 feet within schools, houses, places of worship, medical facilities when they're open. And that includes a clinic on Latrobe Drive in Charlotte that provides abortion care. And this has been such a contentious issue for years in Charlotte. And my understanding is that the protesters who protest 7 or 6 days a week that the clinic is open say that this would be infringing on their rights, that they wouldn't be allowed to have this amplified sound within 200 feet of the clinic. I think it's important to point out, though, that they would be able to picket. They would be able to hand out pamphlets. They would be able to still be able to spread their message in that way. It just wouldn't be through amplified sound. And if you've ever been to Latrobe Drive before, you've seen very large speakers that are pointed at the clinic. And it is quite loud, and it is kind of this battle between the clinic and the protesters of just how much sound is too much sound, and there is, noise ordinance issues that have been going on for years there.
And this battle between the the clinic people and the protesters have been going on for a while, right? I mean, has there been previous attempts to try and deal with this?
Oh, yeah. I think there's been a lot. And, I know Mayor Pro Temp Julie Isolt has said that the police are confused about how to enforce the noise ordinance. And according to Julie Isolt, they have asked for more guidance. They've said, we don't know we get these calls, we come out, and by the time the police actually come out to enforce the ordinance, sound has been turned off, or they're not exactly sure what to do from there. So this has been going on for a really long time. And I also think it's important to note that property next to the clinic has been purchased by protesters, and they've been able to clear some land there and hold their meetings, their gatherings, their protesting right next to the clinic. So it is interesting that protesters feel like their First Amendment rights are being infringed on by these proposed changes, but it does appear that there is still a lot of ample room for them to gather and have their say.
Well, let's hear from one of those protesters. Peter Asick is a priest at St. Matthew Catholic Church in South Charlotte, and he's a frequent protester there outside of a preferred women's health. And he and other protesters were at the council, and here's what he said.
There are those who oppose our efforts to help. For them, they do not want any type of discussion or debate. They simply want us silenced. And unfortunately, the proposed ordinance with its vagueness seems to simply offer them a tool to silence us.
And let's hear from Mayor Pro Tem Julie Isolt, who talked to WSOC afterwards and said that the ordinance revisions would not infringe on any group First Amendment rights.
The police said that the ordinance for them was outdated, that they can't enforce it because it just doesn't apply to what's happening in Charlotte today.
Joe?
I really think this is going to be the contentious issue of the summer. We already saw dozens of protesters pack city council chambers on a night when this topic was on nobody's radar. In response to that, the clinic's director has already organized people on a petition. Hundreds of people have signed that. It's on the agenda for Monday. There's going to be a public hearing about that, about the issue. And I think this is one of those topics that will draw crowds to the chamber with passionate pleas, similar to what we saw with the RNC or even the anti-discrimination ordinance.
And I think we have to acknowledge as well that this is happening at a time when abortion rights are under attack throughout the South and states where some of the more politically conservative states. So I think you're absolutely right. Not only will this be an issue through the summer, but right up until the election, I believe.
And I think it's interesting how this is going to play out with plans for the new Planned Parenthood to be opening in Charlotte too, and how that's going to either, how is that going to affect the protesting activity on Latrobe Drive? But I think, Glenn, you're exactly right with everything that's going on in the news that we even heard this morning, just with various abortion care legislation that's going on. I mean, this is an issue that's not going away. And
this won't affect just this issue about protesters outside this abortion clinic, right? This is affecting anything related to noise.
Yeah.
Correct. It's content neutral. They did not single out the protesters on Latrobe Drive here. And the clinic director isn't exactly 100% thrilled with this noise ordinance. She says it will help, but everyone's given and taken here. I'm sure the clinic would have much rather had a noise ordinance that banned protests altogether outside of clinics and medical facilities, not just amplified sound.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're listening to the local news roundup on WFAE Charlotte Talks. There's lots more to talk about this morning. We need to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Mazda of South Charlotte, committed to bridging the gap between adventure and adventurer by helping people select vehicles that fit one's lifestyle. More at MazdaofSouthCharlotte.com. And Liberty Senior Living presenting the Barclay at South Park, dedicated to a whole-person wellness approach to community living with private apartments, chef-prepared meals, and a maintenance-free lifestyle. Details at barclayatsouthpark.com. Monday on Charlotte Talks is the American jury system in decline. The Constitution guarantees a trial by jury, and it's embedded in our culture through TV court dramas. But in reality, only a fraction of cases actually make it to trial. In North Carolina last year, juries decided fewer than 1.5% of criminal cases. An expert on trials and jury behaviors is worried about the implications for democracy. He joins us for that when Charlotte Talks, Monday at 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
Robert Mueller's investigation lasted 674 days. What happens next could rely on just 19 words.
If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
Also, new abortion laws push Disney to rethink where it does business, and wild weather impacts millions. The Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
The Roundup of the Week's news continues with 1A from 10 to noon after Charlotte Talks on 90.7 WFAE.
Welcome back to the Charlotte Talks Local News Roundup on WFAE. I'm David Borax. We're taking a look at the week's top local stories with our panel. Glenn Berkins, editor and publisher of QCityMetro.com. Jonathan Lowe, a reporter for Spectrum News. Sarah D'Elia, a WFAE reporter. And reporter Joe Bruno from WSOC-TV. And Joe, another item at the City Council on Tuesday. The council approved a $4.5 million contract for electric buses at the airport. Well, what are they doing and why are they doing this?
So here's a stat that really stood out to me. The buses at the airport, they run on diesel fuel and they burn 547,000 gallons a year of diesel fuel. So the airport is switching things up. They're starting to transition to electric buses. They purchased 5 and they hope by 2026 it will be a fully electric fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of a much larger green effort. I know in solid waste, they're moving away from diesel trucks to compressed natural gas because of these trucks spend a lot of time idling in these diesel trucks, and they put a lot of CO2s in the atmosphere.
The one thing to know about the electric buses, they're more expensive on the front end to purchase, but they are less expensive to maintain over years, and of course, there's not that 547,000 gallons of diesel fuel. So
yeah,
obviously they save on fuel costs.
They last longer as well. The current diesel buses only last around 8, and at any given time there's a dozen or 13 that are out of service.
What do we know about electric buses and maintenance and life of those buses?
I've in some cities I've heard that have done this, they last 10 to 15 years longer than a diesel bus. I don't know what the average is for a diesel bus, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, Charlotte has been under federal pressure to reduce emissions in our area over the years. I think we're doing pretty well right now, but one of the major sources of emissions is diesel vehicles. And so it's not just the city that's looking at this. It's, they're encouraging business owners, and there are incentives for business owners to replace old diesel vehicles with more efficient ones. So.
And conceivably, David, with the growth that we're seeing out at Charlotte Douglas, those buses are only going to be driving farther as we add parking spaces and more lanes at the terminal.
So will we see more of these over the years?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's turn our attention now to another thing that happened this week. There was an active shooter training at the Police Training Academy, and I'm told that more than 400 people registered. Jonathan, you were there. Who was there with you, and what did you see?
So I would say the more than 400 that were there, I don't know. Sarah and I were talking before we went to air about if it was crowded. That is a huge auditorium there at the Police Training Academy. It wasn't full. But certainly there, were hundreds there.
Let me back up a minute.
Sure.
This was a training that CMPD offered to the public, right?
It is. So they have been doing, and they call it active survival training, not active shooter training. And there's a reason. Once you get in, it's 2 hours long. Once you get into it, you kind of understand what they mean by active survival. But they've been doing this training since 2015. And they, Officer Jonathan Frisk, one of the trainers for these sessions, will tell you that the one that was held this week was not because of the incident at UNC Charlotte, although they did get a number of calls and emails requesting for them to have this training. But they do it across the city, churches, businesses, and now also in CMS as well.
Many of us, if we work in a company here, you've probably been through this training. I know at WFAE we had active survival training in our newsroom because of some incidents that have happened at news organizations. What are some of the tips and points that they make in this training?
So they start with the history, and I have to tell people that, we live in a different time, and they really expose you to that with this training from the very beginning. But they start with the history of active shooters situations, and they make the definition of an active shooter is someone who is trying to kill as many people as possible. So even the UNC Charlotte shooting, that was just a shooting and a killing. It wasn't an active shooter situation. So they use the example of Pulse nightclub, Sandy Hook, and of course going all the way back to Columbine, just nitpicking that apart, showing people what happened, using victims and decisions they may have made that maybe led to them either being killed or people that survived, how they survived. And then they go into talking about what do you do if someone comes into your office building right now and shoots you? You only have 2 seconds to make a decision, and in that 2 seconds, they're like, you're dead. So you have to get up, you have to move, but you also cannot get tunnel vision. So it's the training. Again, and they will tell you that it can be difficult for some because it gets into some really tough subject matter. But it's, again, a 2-hour training that CMPD will tell you it's the way of our society now, and it's training that you probably should take, or someone should take. There were mostly UNC Charlotte students there, of course, because of what has happened. Them and their parents were there. But I did meet a lot of other people just from the general public. Also people who have taken David, what I thought was interesting as well, there were people in there who have taken other defensive training classes. And so there were some people in there who have looked at this as repeated training that they want to take so as to always be ready. And you have to think that's a different mentality.
Jonathan, having sat through it, do you feel more prepared?
I want to take it again, actually, as a private citizen, and not to be too preachy or on my soapbox, but I'm going to tell every person
go ahead.
I know. I'm going to, honestly, my friends, my family, any person I come in contact with needs to go through this 2-hour training.
Yeah, the thing that I took away when we had somebody from a CMPD officer come in and do the active training at WFAE was that, you remember stop, drop, and roll. You know if you're ever on fire exactly what to do, because that's just ingrained in you from a
fire drills.
Right, exactly. And you'll always remember that. But with an active shooter training, maybe you go to one, but unless you do that kind of repetitive over and over again, it would be really easy to get stuck.
Because, and as Glenn just asked me, am I ready? I don't know, because one of the things that they tell you is, and they go into detail about, is your heart rate is going to go up. And what do you do when your heart rate goes up? Are you able to think through a situation when you're panicking?
Well, Jonathan, are they going to be doing this again? Do we know?
They are. So, as I mentioned, they are currently doing this specific active survival training in CMS. They are working to teach it to every teacher in the district. They expect that to take about a year. But they are looking to do these larger scale active survival trainings every quarter. So I know that Officer Frisk mentioned CPCC up in Huntersville, and he mentioned one other place that they want to do. It escapes me at the moment, but they are looking to do these larger scale events every quarter, so people will have the opportunity to register for a future one.
What's sad is that we've actually gotten to this point. I rarely go to a public event now where I don't look for exits, whether it's a movie theater or even church. You start looking around and you play out scenarios in your mind. What would you do if?
You would have done very well with the training, because that's one of the things that they said is always know an exit, always have an escape plan. And it's sad, because on one side you're like, I am not going to live like this, where I need to be prepared for an active shooter. But on the flip side, when you go through this training, you're like, gosh, I need to be prepared.
Need to be ready. Well, good tips I'm afraid, for modern life here. Let's zoom out a bit and let's go to Washington for a couple of things here. All eyes were on Special Counsel Robert Mueller this week. He's been investigating allegations of Russian meddling in the 2016 election and whether the Trump administration tried to hide any involvement. Mueller gave his first public statement since turning over results of the investigation to Attorney General William Barr. Did we hear anything new here?
I think so. I watched his entire address or speech and the analysis after. The analysis after really focused on two things. The fact that the special prosecutor said that if they had found that the president had not committed a crime, and this was when he was kind of in the realm of obstruction of justice, that if they had found that that the president did not commit a crime, they would have so stated. The other thing that stuck out to me was the fact that the special prosecutor spent a lot of time in his 7.5 minute address talking about the fact that we could not go past what our policies allow us to do, meaning we could not investigate whether the president committed a crime. So as to say that this is Congress's job, he totally put, I feel, in his address, and it was in the analysis after, that he was telling Congress this is your job to deal with. It also contradicted the Attorney General's assessment of the special prosecutor's report. So I think he said a lot without saying much.
So there was obviously a lot of reaction to Mueller's first statement here. It's been fairly predictable along political lines. You know, the Republicans and the president tended to repeat their claims that the report exonerated him, and Democrats, well, there's lots of rumbling about impeaching President Trump. One of those who had a reaction this week was Democrat Kamala Harris. She was campaigning in South Carolina on Wednesday, just as Mueller was making a statement. And she's a California senator and a Democratic presidential candidate, and she says Congress needs to begin the impeachment process.
We have got to now let the process, start its course around Congress acting on what we know is essentially indictable evidence.
What are some of the other reactions that we've heard? We have some from our local congressional delegation.
So I think what really got people's attention was yesterday, Representative G.K. Butterfield came out and spoke to our Tim Boyum at Spectrum News and essentially said that he is on board with impeachment. A week prior, he said that he was not, I believe it was a week and a half prior, Representative Butterfield said he was not quite on that page yet. Well, yesterday he said, with all the evidence that he has seen, that he believes that the president committed obstruction of justice and that he is on board. So with impeachment, so pressure is certainly mounting after the special prosecutor's address on Speaker Pelosi to now bring this to impeachment.
And I think that's a good point, that pressure is mounting on her, but it's still pretty much for the most part it's going to rest with her and her decision whether to pursue this. And
it still doesn't sound, Glenn, like she's on that
and
page.
I'm not hearing anything that indicates that is an avenue she wants to take right now. I think she continues to want to have hearings, see what comes from those hearings, see if momentum builds for impeachment. I think that would be her preferred method.
Pelosi also, she has been saying that this is what Trump wants. Trump wants the House to go down this route. And Pelosi's very smart. She's not going to lead her colleagues down this road when she knows that it's dead in the water in the Senate.
Right, and it has not worked in the past.
I think some of the Republicans see this situation as an opening, like the inability of the Democrats to line up in one way. I think Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, both supporters of the president, have essentially said something like, Democrats, do this or move on.
Right.
So scale of 1 to 10, what do we think the likelihood of impeachment is right at the moment? 10 is impeachment.
0.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't alive when it happened the first time, so I have nothing to base it on.
All right, well, let's go to Raleigh now. The state budget is in the news this week. The Senate voted yesterday to approve their version of the budget. 29-18 was the vote. They cut off some Democrats' efforts to debate, and in at least one case, the microphone of a Democrat who was attempting to introduce an amendment was cut off by the head of the Senate. The budget also has all kinds of Republican proposals that Democrats don't like. Lots of nasty politics here. What are some of the big issues?
Oh, I think the fact that they want to move the Department, this was a surprise for Democrats. They want to move the Department of Health and Human Services headquarters from Raleigh to Granville County, which, as you mentioned, is north of Raleigh. They also want to, there was no Medicaid expansion, so that's one thing that Democrats have been pressing for. Lots of other changes.
They want to, I think it would also prohibit teachers from using personal leave days to attend the types of rallies and protests that we've seen them attend, and shut down local school districts.
Wow.
The Senate's budget includes about 5.5% raise for state employees. It also includes, I think the average teacher raise is about 3.5% in the Senate budget, which Democrats say was not high enough. It provides $300 for teachers to buy their own school supplies. As you mentioned, it does not include anything like Medicaid expansion. And another controversial thing, it cuts the staffing levels for one of the chief justices of the Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court.
Right.
One of the interesting things that's there, it would require personal finance training for high school students to graduate. And as an old personal finance columnist, I think that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. I think we need more such basic training for kids getting out of high school.
So I was going to add to what Joe said about the cutting the staff for the new Chief Justice. One of the reasons that has been really controversial is to just to remind folks, she is the first black female Chief Justice here in the state, and certainly this probably has some political undertones with it, because the governor was basically lambasted when he appointed her as the Chief Justice, because Republicans said there was another senior member that was more qualified, who is now the only Republican left on the Supreme Court. And so this looks kind of like some retribution for her being appointed. And now the Republicans in their Senate in their budget, have cut her staff in half.
Well, we're expecting a final vote in the Senate today, but there's still disagreement with the House on a number of issues. What do they disagree on, and how do they work this out?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it doesn't, for some in the House, at least the Democrats, it doesn't do enough for education and teacher pay, is what I gather from it.
There are different amounts for the raises for teachers and state employees.
Right.
Between the two of those. I think there are different start dates for some of those raises.
But right. With the fact that it doesn't include a Medicaid expansion, I think it's dead on arrival for the governor. I think there's a good chance that he will veto the whole thing.
Yeah, Dan Blue mentioned that the playoffs haven't started yet, because it's more than likely that the governor is going to veto any budget that does not have Medicaid expansion in it, or at least some of his significant proposals. And Republicans need Democratic votes this year to get a budget passed or override a veto. So we're going to see the negotiation really begin once a budget is sent to the governor's desk and he gets his veto pen out.
2 Democrats sided with the Republicans in the Senate to pass that budget yesterday. So,
well,
it wasn't all one-sided.
There'll be a conference committee to try and work out those details, and then they'll try to get back together and do this. Send it to the governor, and it looks like more fighting ahead on this. Yep. It's time for us to take another break. We'll be right back with more of the local news roundup on WFAE. I'm David Borax. We'll be right back.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Duke Energy, dedicated to generating more than half the electricity in the Carolinas with zero carbon emissions. Facts about lower emissions at duke-energy.com/getmorefacts. Coming up next at 10, the roundup of the week's news continues on 1A with news from around the nation. Robert Mueller made a statement about his investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election this week and reaffirmed that his office did not conclude whether the president had committed a crime. Plus, more on abortion legislation from around the country and an altered video of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Those stories and more next at 10 with Joshua Johnson and guests on 1A's Friday News Roundup. Our local news roundup continues in just a moment here on 90.7 WFAE.
Stephen Krotz, Integrated Marketing Coordinator, Culture and Heritage Museums, a WFAE underwriter.
There's a big relationship between the work that we do communicating and preserving the Carolina Piedmont's culture and heritage and what people come to WFAE for. It's interesting content, and we definitely see the relationship between what WFAE offers and what we offer.
Underwriting on WFAE says a lot about your business. Email underwriting@wfae.org for information.
Welcome back. It's the Charlotte Talks Local News Roundup on WFAE. I'm David Borax. We're taking a look at the week's top local stories. With us this week are Jonathan Lowe from Spectrum News, Glenn Berkins of QCityMetro.com, Joe Bruno of WSOC-TV, and Sarah D'Elia from WFAE. Another item that came up at the state legislature this week, there was some movement on legislation that would address North Carolina's craft beer industry. Always an exciting topic on a hot Friday in the summer, beer, right? Mm-hmm. There's been a compromise between the distributors who control most of the beer sales in the state and the craft breweries. They're getting a chance to brew more. Who's up on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great win for places like Old Mecklenburg, Noda, places like Red Oak up in Alamance County. Basically now breweries can make up to 100,000 barrels of beer a year and sell up to 50,000 barrels on their own. That's a major compromise because before breweries were only allowed to sell 25,000 barrels of beer on their own. So what that means is, we could see more beer and we could see more beer in different places.
Mm-hmm. And the issue here of turning over control of their beer and their brands to the distributors, that was the real sticking point, right?
Absolutely. Distributors have been kind of brewing with the breweries for a while now here. But this was a pretty big compromise. It's one of two major alcohol bills that were in the General Assembly this year. The other bill hasn't picked up much traction, but that would allow you to order like 4 beers at a time. I think it extends ABC hours as well. But that one hasn't gone many places yet.
Well, the governor has actually signed that craft beer bill, so it is now taking effect, and we'll see some changes there. Another thing in Raleigh that came up this week was the school superintendent, Mark Johnson, announced a partnership to set up a school safety tip line for students to report dangerous situations anonymously. Jonathan?
Yeah, so the state spent about $5 million, and it's an app. It's called Say Something. And essentially what it is for students in schools across the state. It's up to the school districts to take part, but basically it's an app you use on your smartphone, and kids, students, the onus is on them to, if they see something, they can put in a tip. And the app allows them to give their school location, information about the tip. And so it's all directed towards school safety. We at Spectrum News reached out, at least here locally, to CMS, and in their statement basically said that they're going to look at the app. They're still determining what it provides, what it can do, and whether it applies to their security plan and protocols within Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. But suffice it to say, another effort to increase school safety and get kids to, when they see something, when they see a weapon on campus, when a student makes a comment, when something's written in the bathroom that may be threatening, they can report it anonymously and privately and hopefully make things safer across the state. But again, it's an app that districts can take part in. Mm-hmm. They don't have to.
Back to Charlotte now for a story that really important one in the African American community and anybody that's interested in the city's history and African American history. There was an announcement yesterday about the Excelsior Club on Beatties Ford Road. It's a historically African American club. It's been vacant for a few years, and its owner wants to demolish it. Sarah, what's going on here? And for those who aren't familiar, what was the Excelsior Club, and why is this an important issue?
Well, I believe it was built in 1944, and it's kind of the staple of West Charlotte. It's on Beatties Ford Road, and it was the place for African Americans to be able to go and enjoy and not worry about a lot of the other things that were going on in the 40s in Charlotte that was largely very segregated. I think like Nat King Cole was not a regular, but stop by. Louis Armstrong. I know Bill Clinton and Al Gore campaigned at the Excelsior Club. So it really is this Charlotte staple. And it's kind of funny because since I've been in Charlotte, the Excelsior Club has just sort of been like, what is going on with this building? What's happening? And this week we learned that it's been placed on this National Trust for Historic Preservation. They put it on America's 11 most endangered historic places. So people feel a little torn about, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? But it is sort of up in the air. I believe June 12th is when the building could be up for demolition.
Right. I would say that I don't think we know that the owner is planning to tear it down or demolish it. She's certainly done the paperwork that would permit her to do that.
Fair enough.
It's also up for sale, so there's the possibility that it could be purchased. As you mentioned, David, this building is extremely important in some sectors of the African American community. It harkens back to a time when African Americans had few options or places to go. And more recently, it has hosted wedding receptions and fish fries and social gatherings. It has a lot of deep history in the Charlotte African American community, and there are a lot of people who want to see it preserved.
So, being that I grew up here, my mother and my uncle, I have very specific memories of them going to the Excelsior on a Thursday or Friday night for a fish fry, or it was a jazz spot, jazz hangout, but also it was a political hub. Anybody who wanted to run for political office in this city made a stop at the Excelsior Club before it closed in 2016. So, Glenn is absolutely right. There are people that I still know and I'm related to that remember the Excelsior very specifically. So yes, when I ride past there, it's kind of sad to see it still vacant and falling into disrepair. But there are two specific reasons that it ended up on that 11 most endangered historic places list. And this is according to the executive director at Preserve Mecklenburg. It has fallen into disrepair. I think it needs about $400,000 in repairs. And also that area along Beatties Ford Road, Smallwood, Biddleville, is seeing an alarming rate, I shouldn't say alarming rate, a very fast rate of regentrification. And so developers are coming into that. Everything around it is being developed at a fast rate. And so you're just seeing it kind of get left behind. People and the city council members and the people that were at the news conference yesterday talking about it ending up on this list can't tell you what's next, but they do say that it ending up on this list is not a bad thing. Even though it sounds bad, it actually could get a lot of exposure, national exposure, for anybody who gets the National Trust for Historic Preservation newsletter. So, some think that this could get the attention on the Excelsior in a good way to find somebody to buy it, turn it into a restaurant, a more modern hangout, something. But with all of the history there and all of the lives that it has touched and all the memories that are there, I think there are a lot of people in this community that want to see something saved with it. I just want to mention that coming up on June 15th, the Excelsior will be part of a larger exhibit at the Charlotte Museum of History. It will be an exhibit looking at some of the old music hangouts here in Charlotte, and the Excelsior will be part of that exhibit. So make sure you check that out. It starts on the 15th at the Museum of History on Shamrock.
I think Charlotte's in this really interesting position, too, of what are we going to invest in and what are we going to preserve, what are we going to save? Because if you look at something like the Carolina Theater, I mean, the Foundation for the Carolinas is spending about $40 million to renovate that. That was, I'm not saying that that's not an important and culturally significant building, but what puts that ahead of something like the Excelsior Club? I think we really have to look at our historic buildings and decide what do we really want to preserve and why are certain things getting invested in and why are certain things, it seems like, not? What's the priority for Charlotte, and what's the priority for our history? I think a lot of those conversations are going on right now.
The Excelsior is owned by State Representative Carla Cunningham. She got possession of the building after her husband died, the late Pete Cunningham, who was also a state representative. The asking price for the property is $1.5 million. And there have been calls in the community for the city to buy the property, for the county to buy the property. That has not happened. Some have pointed out that it doesn't have a lot of parking. It needs a lot of repairs, as Jonathan has pointed out, up to possibly $400 million for repairs and to bring it up to code.
400,000.
That's what I say.
Million.
No, not 400 million, 400,000 for repairs and to bring it up to code. But, so far, no one has stepped forward to purchase that building.
It's sad.
The county had discussions about possibly stepping in to buy it. They had the property appraised, and they offered the owner a couple $100,000 more than what the property is worth, but it was significantly less than what she is seeking, the $1.5 million, so they were not able to come to a deal. And I checked in yesterday. As of now, there's just nothing on the county front. So if you're looking for Mecklenburg County to purchase this property, that does not look like that will happen at this time.
And that's why, to Sarah's point, that June 12th date that she mentions, that's because of the historical designation from the county was only for a year. And so that is about to expire on June 12th, which would open it up to demolition, although we don't know if that's what's going to
Well, $1.5 million, that price is reflecting anticipation of what's happening in that corridor. As you mentioned, Jonathan, we've got the streetcar coming up Beatty's Ford Road. That whole neighborhood is changing.
Well, if you look at, one of the folks that was at the news conference yesterday made the point, if you owned a piece of property, which is what any developer or any property owner here in the city is doing right now, you're going to try to get as much as try to get top dollar. I mean, that's just how things work. So while there is some frustration directed at the current owner, it's hard to say who is at fault for what. People want to see something happen with the Excelsior.
And in all fairness, before it closed, it's not like the Excelsior Club was being overrun by patrons.
Right.
It wasn't what it was. It wasn't what it was, and you might even say in some degrees it was struggling. Yeah. So it's not a surprise that it was shut down, especially given the repairs needed.
And the kind of the downslope of that community and some of the social challenges that are in that area that are now beginning to rebound because of interest in that area.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got to talk during this holiday week about the flag. There's a lot of talk about a large flag in Statesville. My WFAE colleague Serafina Wright had a story on NPR this week about Statesville's crackdown on the large American flag that's flying at the Camping World outlet there. The city of Statesville passed an ordinance previously that limits the size of flags. Where did that rule come from, and what's the dispute here?
The flag that Camping World flies is significantly larger than any flag that you've probably ever seen. There's, if you've been to Concord near the Speedway, there's a similar flag flying over there. But basically, Statesville has this ordinance that says a flag can only be a certain dimension if it is flying in the highway district. Since this flag is bigger, they've been fining Camping World $50 a day for every day that the flag is up, and it's gone up to about $11,000 in fines for Camping World. So the CEO came down to Statesville yesterday, and he's a reality star, and this was very reality TV fashion. He gets into a news conference and says, "I'm determined to keep this flag up. I'm willing to go to jail over this flag." Statesville, as you can imagine, there's a lot of passionate people who are very much in support of what Camping World is doing. So Statesville has taken a lot of heat from people, and a lot of feedback has come in. So the mayor's office released a statement yesterday saying, we're going to allow the flag to stay in place. We're going to craft an amendment so it doesn't violate this ordinance.
Just back to the origins of this rule. Does anybody know why they passed this rule in the first place? think it was related to Confederate flags.
Right. People were flying very large Confederate flags, and I know that's what it stemmed from, and this was the ordinance that kind of came from it. So this seems to be an exception to the rule. And I know that the owner has said that, he wants to be able to fly his flag, but really any flag should be able to be flown. I think he's pretty liberal in his definition of size with flags. I think that's fair to say.
So, Joe, it does sound like this one's maybe going to go off the headlines.
Yes, I think Statesville's going to approve this exception for Camping World, and the flag will fly high for people to see for years to come.
All right, got a couple more minutes here to talk about a few other news stories. There was news this week that another young Charlottean is headed to Broadway, Renee Rapp. She's got a role in Mean Girls. Joe, this sounds like a great story. What do we know about her?
Well, she's going to be playing Regina George in Mean Girls. You ever see Mean Girls?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Great movie. Yes, it is. The 19-year-old, she is a Charlotte area star. She went to Northwest School of the Arts, and she won a Bloomie Award last year. This is a pretty big deal. Everybody knows what Mean Girls is, and she's the star of the show. So congrats to her.
And the Checkers, the Charlotte Checkers, the American Hockey League team here in Charlotte, is playing in the championship round for the first time. They have a chance to win it all against the Chicago Wolves. That begins on Saturday. That team has had quite a run. Anybody a hockey fan here? Anybody been to games?
I think it's just exciting to have sports success in Charlotte. After a rough year with the Panthers and the Hornets, now we have someone to pull for. And the community is responding to this. More than 8,000 people packed the Bojangles Coliseum for Game 7, so hopefully they'll have great crowds for this next series.
Speaking of sports success, there was an announcement yesterday that Charlotte will host the ACC baseball tournament in 2020. Up at BB&T Stadium.
As it relates to the Checkers, though, really quickly, if they continue to do well, which we all hope they do, CMS will have to move graduation to Spectrum Center.
Gotcha. That's Jonathan Lowe from Spectrum News, Glenn Berkins, publisher of Q-City Metro, Sarah D'Elia from WFAE, and Joe Bruno of WSOC TV. I'm David Borax. Have a great weekend.